gut microbiome is one major factor that can influence the development of chronic diseases that many people tend to overlook. But new research has shown that the health of your microbiome, it can influence nearly all of the risk factors of cardiovascular disease. And in a new cutting-edge research paper, we've seen that the microbiome can even help control your cholesterol levels. The study I've been talking about was looking at the gut microbiome of people in the Framingham Heart Study. And if you haven't heard of the Framingham Heart Study, this is just a very huge, multi-generational study, so it's pretty well known. But this new research, they were specifically interested in analyzing the microbial genome and metabolites in the gut microbiome of some of these patients. And I believe they looked at stool samples from over 1,400 participants. What they found that was so interesting, so groundbreaking, was that in the patients they tested, they saw that if they had this certain bacteria in their gut microbiome, Oscillibacter, this was linked to lower blood and fecal cholesterol. So this one bacteria in the gut was linked to lower cholesterol, which got the scientists thinking this has enormous implications for anyone struggling with cardiovascular disease. And let me just put this in perspective to you, because this is a huge deal. This is a big breakthrough, because cardiovascular disease is the #1 disease worldwide. It is the #1 killer of adults, and each year about 17.9 adults die of cardiovascular disease, which really highlights our need for preventative measures so people can avoid developing this disease in the future. Now, cardiovascular disease is really this broad umbrella term that covers a lot of diseases as long as they're linked to something with the heart or affecting your blood vessels. So this actually all includes things like coronary heart disease, stroke, arterial disease, or atherosclerosis. And there are several common risk factors for developing cardiovascular disease. In this video, we'll mostly be focusing on controlling your cholesterol, but other risk factors are smoking, tobacco, obesity, high blood pressure, poor diet, and a lot more. And the study I'm showing you today by far is not the first to look at, is there a link between the gut microbiome and the development of different metabolic diseases? To date, there's actually been several associations on how the intestinal ecosystem impacts diseases like obesity and diabetes. For example, studies conducted in North America, Europe, and Asia all saw that with people with type 2 diabetes, they had a reduced number of butyrate-producing species in their gut. In obesity, so a different global health crisis, the intestinal ecosystem also has been seen to play a major role. Research has shown that an increased abundance of Akkermansia leads to a lower risk of developing obesity. But let's focus in on just cardiovascular disease, because there's already been several studies that have honed in on how the health of the gut microbiome is affecting these different risk factors for cardiovascular disease. For example, a study in 2019 saw that certain bacteria in the gut were linked to high systolic blood pressure. This study showed that when Catabacter and Robinsonella were present in the gut microbiome, they're in high abundance, this was actually linked to high values for blood pressure. Other research has pinpointed how dysbiosis, or when your microbiome is sort of out of balance, that this has led to different negative health effects, including the development of atherosclerosis, or when your blood vessels, they get restricted or narrow because of these fatty plaques forming on the walls of the vessels. Meaning there's a lot of new and emerging evidence on how bacteria could play a protective role in metabolic diseases, and specifically in cardiovascular diseases. But let's get back to cholesterol, or controlling cholesterol, because that's really the risk factor I want to talk about today. And this new study really adds to this wealth of information. Now, cholesterol is really just a waxy type of fat in our blood, but it tends to have this very bad or negative reputation, because if your body has too much cholesterol, this is when you run into problems like it's going to start to gather in your arteries. It'll make these plaques that really restrict or limit blood flow to different parts of your body. And when this happens, you're at an increased risk for heart attack and stroke. So what the researchers realized is that, hey, they may have a very novel way to control cholesterol, right? Simply by having the right bacteria in the gut. Oscillibacter could be used potentially in the future for people who have that high cholesterol level and help prevent the risk of cardiovascular disease. But there's really one more question left. What exactly is Oscillibacter doing in our gut to lower our cholesterol levels? Like, how in the world is this working? What the scientists found is that this bacteria, it has the ability to metabolize cholesterol. So it has the ability to break down this compound and convert it into other products. And by doing this, it's essentially lowering our cholesterol level for us, which is exactly why the study saw this link with people that had Oscillibacter in their gut, that they also had lower cholesterol levels. It's also thought that Oscillibacter might work synergistically with other bacteria that are also present in the gut. So they sort of work as a team where, for example, Oscillibacter might just have the enzymes and genes to transform cholesterol into a different compound, but then a different bacteria or bacterium, they come along and take that compound and can either break it down or transform it into something else where then it's finally removed from the body. So sort of like tag teaming or a relay race in this case. Of course, I find all this science just super fascinating, but also you might be thinking like, what does that mean for me and for you? Or what does that mean for the future of people who suffer from cardiovascular disease? In particular, where I could see this going is being used for next generation probiotics. Probiotics are live microorganisms that when you eat them in large amounts, they make it into your gut unharmed and can colonize and grow there and give you some of these good health effects. The next wave of probiotic products might just include Oscillibacter to target people who, one, have high cholesterol, maybe are trying to control their cholesterol, or have a family history of heart disease. Basically, this would be a new therapeutic use of bacteria, of beneficial bacteria, to improve human gut and heart health. And it won't just be Oscillibacter in these next generation probiotics, because this area into how our gut microbiome influences different metabolic diseases is just so hot right now. We're just learning so much new information. For example, we could also see Akkermansia being used as a probiotic in the future because it's been identified with sort of this anti-obesity or anti-diabetic benefits. Fecal bacterium is also another good candidate because this has been linked to improvement of different gut diseases. So I think it's very likely that in the future, we're going to see all this research coming together and seeing these new useful microorganisms being used and sold as a probiotic. Unfortunately, there is no probiotic on the market right now that contains Oscillibacter. So the best strategy that I can give to you is that your gut might naturally already contain Oscillibacter. And if that's the case, what you should be doing is make sure you're eating a healthy, prebiotic-rich diet, and this will really help to make sure you boost the abundance of Oscillibacter. You sort of help them grow in number, and that way you get those nice beneficial health effects.